So I made this keynote on really kind of an example of disruptive thought leadership and why I think that that's something that we really need to incubate more of within advocacy, especially in our group, and just kind of demonstrating what that is. I'm going to go quickly about me. Then I'm going to be focusing on this, will kind of, I guess, be the Tennessee State Report. Um, we'll be over the developmental centers in HCBS, 14C in Tennessee, and then going over a housing battle there, just quickly touching upon my next steps personally, what my next kind of projects are. So this image here is just kind of like to highlight what this is going to be about, the background, growing up, hearing kind of like what little girls are made of. Which will be of no surprise to any of you, was the little girl who, starting very early on, kindergarten, first grade, we used to have report cards that, your grades were on the left, and then on the right were your conduct, right? There was a grid, and I'd get all these excellent conducts, except that I was disruptive. I have, inherently been disruptive my entire life. But as I got older, I learned that the being disruptive was not a negative thing. Disruptive is not destructive. It's not harmful. It really focuses on kind of the the forgotten population, whether you're talking about marketing or you're talking about technology innovation. But in advocacy, we're really focusing on populations that have unmet needs. It does challenge the status quo. We're looking to fill gaps in representation. We're not so focused on, big quantities and serving the whole population with a little bit of supports. We're really focused on quality focused frameworks. And frameworks are different than hard and fast rules. It really kind of breaks from the rigidity and dogma of these hard set rules and sets up frameworks that can work for anybody's individualized situation. And that is really kind of the premise of disruptive thought leadership. And this isn't going to be a how to on disruptive thought leadership. It's just going to be more of a couple examples of how I do that. So this is a little bit about me. I'm the third generation working in the field of developmental disabilities, lifelong advocate. I am a sibling of somebody with developmental disabilities. I'm also the mother of Jadyn, who has SYNGAP1 and profound autism. And I'm also a self-advocate, a brain tumor survivor. As Hugo said, I currently serve as the policy director for the National Council on Severe Autism, as the patient advocacy director for the SYNGAP Research Fund, and I am on the statewide planning and policy council for what is now the Department of Disability and Aging for Tennessee, the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disability. Former developmental director for a veterans 501c3, and featured in various media for that. But here's my LinkedIn. And throughout this, I have little QR codes. I'll try to send Hugo the slides after this so you can go through them. With the QR codes, you can just scan on your phone and it'll take you to the certain websites. So this is kind of where it started, right? And as I said, I'm third generation. This is my mom. She was the oldest, like me. And this is her brother, who had developmental disabilities also. And this is the next in line, which is my Aunt Debbie, who is my godmother. And this is my Uncle Jeff. My Uncle Jeff's the only one who ended up not in the field of developmental disabilities. He went on to serve our country and actually worked into and retired from the military. And this is my Aunt Debbie as an adult, and their mom, my grandma. My Aunt Debbie, my grandma, my mom, my stepdad, my grandfather, everybody in my family all worked in the old developmental and Pennsylvania, multiple different ones, until their closure. This is little Jackie, and my brother who had developmental disabilities, and then my baby brother who does not. And this is us as adults. So growing up, my brother, he did take a while to get to independence. He is now pretty much fully independent. My mom still helps with a little bit of management with him, but he lives on his own. He drives. He does his own shopping. He cleans his own house. He really does live a pretty independent life. It just took him a little longer to get there, but he always had the support of mother and I, my mother acting as guardian, and then me as power of attorney. And that picture there is actually his first time driving. We were so excited after having rehabbed for over a year from an anoxic brain injury. And then down at the bottom, just adding to kind of the lived experience demonstration here, is my daughter Jadyn on the left, and one of her many, many hospitalizations and EEGs. And then on the right, matching her with the headdress here, is me after one of my brain surgeries, which I had a rare brain tumor removed in 2019, and then subsequently 5 additional surgeries in both Nashville and Boston after that. So that is my kind of lived experience. Hospitals and HCBS issues with Tennessee. And go over the timeline here. Starting in 1995, there was a lawsuit filed by People First, which is a self-advocacy section of ARC and the State's Department of Justice against Clover Bottom Developmental Center in Tennessee. And I think it's really important to note that Clover Bottom was not like the wonderful state hospitals that I grew up in since I was a toddler, right? Clover Bottom was much more similar to Willowbrook. And so for context, as we get in later on into this presentation, to know that that's the experience of people in Tennessee with developmental centers. That is that's their reality. That's all they know is the developmental centers that were like Willowbrook, and very poorly run, horrific abuses occurred in those facilities. So this was a very lengthy lawsuit. It took 10 years. Halfway through, they did close Arlington Developmental Center. And then in 2015, their final exit plan came to a settlement and was approved, and the final residents were moved out of Clover Bottom Developmental Center. At that time, there were 3 1915 Medicaid HCBS waivers. We were very comprehensive, including you could have sometimes even 3-to-1 support, single placement homes. They provided all of the types of care that somebody might need, and did so in the community. And they also built enough 4-person community homes that could provide ICF level of care, and had a capacity for 150 additional people in those homes. And that was the original intent when they closed the developmental centers. The mayor at the time, closing the last of the large institutions in Tennessee, as challenging and difficult as it is, I believe it will lead us to be one of the best states in regards to services for people with disabilities. I want you to remember that kind of sentiment as we move forward, because that didn't last very long. The problem is, as much as they tell you that it's cheaper to provide care for this population in home and community than in the institutions, that proved not to be true, and it quickly proved very unsustainable. These waivers providing under 1915 waivers were costing on average $300,000 a year, and sometimes upwards of that. And the wait list was growing at an exponential rate, and families were really distressed. And We see that now in Texas. If you look at Texas, they have what, 200 and some thousand people on the wait list, right? And that's the problem there, is that this fully comprehensive waiver, it is going to be very costly, and you're going to have a lot of people who could file with less supports, but they can't access the waiver because our state so much. So what they did, less than a year after the closure of all the state hospitals, now that's no longer an option, right? And after the promises that HCBS was going to be able to provide all of this in home and community, they changed the waivers. They closed the 1915 waivers. Nobody that came into the program after that could access the full comprehensive waiver, though those that were already on could remain on it. We do still have some to this day that are on that old waiver. The old waiver was managed by the state. They were managed by DIDD, which is important to know because their incentive was to provide as many services as possible, because then at the end of the year, they could say to the federal government, we need more money because we've used all of our money, right? Well, in 2016, when they moved to this new 1115 demonstration waiver, that is managed by TennCare, and it's MCO managed. We have 3 MCOs in Tennessee. And so right away, we see a problem with the change in ECF. When you look at, it's talking about the more significant needs individuals, right, related to an intellectual, more intensive level of services and supports. That sounds great, except when you finish the sentence, it says, in order to plan and achieve employment and integrated community living goals. That is the goals, even for those that have the highest level of acuity of need of services in Tennessee, and to become as independent as possible. Now, I don't have a problem with the phrase independent as possible, because I believe that that is the goal for everybody. However, I don't believe that's how it's been translated. I believe that now it's more in alignment with, if they can't be independent, if that isn't the goal, then they just don't get services at all. So that was the original 1115 waiver. It was called TennCare 2. But in 2021, CMS approved TennCare 3. And this further added to problems, because this also is an 1115A demonstration project. But now we really get into really incentivizing the MCOs to just limit care even further, because this new TennCare 3 waiver that we're currently on uses a budget neutrality structure bound by the aggregate cap. So they have a cost cap. And it enables savings by the state to receive federal matching. And it gives states the ability to earn and reinvest shared savings when it underspends. Now, that was sold to us that they were going to be using that shared savings to reinvest in possibly developing a higher acuity group that could be more similar to the old waivers that are now shut down. But that's not what they're doing with the shared savings. Instead, they are doing things that get them kind of media clips of first in the nation. And you know, so we extended early intervention till the age of 5. We gave away 100 million diapers to people under 1. And it's, these kinds of things are good, and they're nice, except you've got families like ours who are sitting there with absolutely no services. Those shared savings are supposed to be going back into developing programs where service gaps exist, and that's not happening. So in 2022, Tennessee did pass SB 2042, which essentially eliminated 14C in the state. And I will note that there has been no studies to determine if anybody who was on a waiver of a 14C waiver actually is in competitive employment at this point. It's also important to note that day programs are not available on ECF choices. Only those that are grandfathered in back here are allowed to access those day programs. So people like my daughter, Jadyn, who is on this waiver, she came in 2018. She doesn't have access to programs. She can't work in competitive integrated employment. So what is she supposed to do? 2023 was the year of parent revolution. I'll go on to that on the next slide. But that came into play on what we're going to call the unsolvables. And then in 2024, here we are. The Tennessee Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disability, now DDA, sent letters to family members and conservators stating it is decommissioning run homes that currently house adults without CF level of care. Remember back here where there was enough 4-person homes? These ones. When they left Clover Bottom and moved them into these 4-person homes and told them this was going to be their forever home, less than 10 years later, they get a letter saying they're decommissioning these to turn them into homes to address the Department of Child Services. Now, the state denies plans to evict adults from their homes. This is ongoing, but obviously we're following this very closely. So this was the issues regarding the unsolvables. Now, it's very important for me to state, because you know, I am on the state council, so this is my commissioner, my deputy commissioner. What I'm about to say here is solely on policy. This is not in any kind of way meant to disparage their character or anything about personalities. This is solely on however, this is to demonstrate kind of where the parent revolution started. And this post got released by the Tennessee Department of Intellectual Disability. They were very proud of this. The commissioner and the deputy commissioner were asked to attend at Kentucky for to discuss, to really highlight the wonderful celebration of our ECF choices waiver and how great it was going and how it was helping us clear our wait lists, and parents kind of lost it. Every single type of meet that I blew up that weekend. I didn't even see this at first, but my phones, my email, Facebook, everything, they were like, did you hear this? You need to watch this. And I did. It was very lengthy. It's like a 2-hour hearing. But specifically, Deputy Commissioner Helen, he talked about them, this population as unsolvable. And that really just made parents irate. But here's some of these are public comments, so I didn't hide their identity. But one parent said, no service providers taking the job. How are you improving this inaction for the underserved, the ones more complex needs? Another said, lack of providers, service without providers equals no services. There are families who have yet to experience this person-centeredness. And then my favorite here, wow, innovation and person-centered services is an interesting way to describe neglect and forced human trafficking because there's no support available. We've never had 1 hour of staff in our whole 4 years in ECF, but go off, right? And when she's talking about the forced human trafficking, what she's speaking of there is this expectation that parents, in lieu of there's no ICFs, there's no placements appropriate for their level of care. Parents are providing this care and largely paid at most $3,000 a month. So it's a load. Hopefully it will. If it doesn't, hold on, I can go. Oh, here it goes. This is going to be, I have a couple clips here, and this is going to be like 4 minutes of clips, but this is going to tell you kind of like how it went. .
Is it on mute?
Often the intensity in an inpatient setting, long-term people that falling in that demographic are just overwhelmingly difficult.
Okay, so he's saying that these are unsolvable, that I'm not sure if it's coming through on your end, but mine should be closed captioned. And then this is, I'm gonna put it over here to the end of this. Um he's saying that they're unsolvable, that he's never seen this be solved in 30 years. He's never seen anybody come up with a solution for this population in 30 years. So in this last 2 minutes here, and again, the QR codes are there. You can watch the whole video later on.
And that's the Director of Developmental Disabilities?
It is the it is the deputy director of developmental disabilities that said this to the Kentucky legislature. And this is what set off the parent revolution last year.
That's amazing.
So, um, like I said, that obviously for obvious reasons, really set the parents off. It mobilized them, and they got quite involved in advocating for serious systems changes. That is currently ongoing still today. So with no meaningful activity, no, like I said, no programming, things like that, our lives significantly changed. I sold my house in the suburbs and I bought Jadyn a little farmstead here. She has her chickens and bunnies, and she's doing things with, value added products and learning a lot of new skills. But again, this is solely on me. She is not receiving any of the services that HCBS quote unquote promises, and we don't have access to higher level of care placements. So knowing that that's the history of Tennessee, knowing that that's where families are, knowing that there had already since September been this huge uproar of families making it very public that ECF had left behind these people and was not serving everybody in ECF, that there was this huge service gap, that this was a really broken system. Along comes this housing battle that came out of nowhere. And I will also quickly say that I didn't know anything about this either. I had already moved up to the federal side. I was very immersed in federal policy projects going on. And this was another where all of my media blew up. Are you going to do something about this? You have to do something about this. I got brought into it late. It had already gone to the House subcommittee and was about to go through the House Health Committee by the time I got involved. And I had about 2 days to try to do something about this. And there's a full write-up on the NCSA blog about it if you do end up wanting more information. But the problem was that there were two new 501c3 organizations that wanted to offer innovative housing projects for Tennesseans. And one was Gloriana, which is an inner-age, inner-ability place that where it's a dream for us, those of us that are possibly looking at keeping our kids at home forever. Once I reach 60, 70 years old after having Jadyn for all of those years, who hasn't seen Mimi and Donna, right? That movie. And at the end of life, having that end of life separation, how heartbreaking. Well, Gloriana is going to solve the problem because I could go to Gloriana with Jadyn and both of us receive whatever level of care is appropriate. They have independent living, they have assisted living, they have full skilled nursing care. And so this is a mom and her son that have moved, that are going to be using Gloriana. And it's important to note that both of these places are integrated. They both have multiple all abilities, neurotypical and disabled, living together. So this is not an issue there, although the state tried to make it one. Brightstone is something we're more familiar with, like 29 acres and the different places that we have, Mary Ogle's place. So Brightstone is going to be offering 7-bedroom single occupant rooms, right? 6.5 baths, 140-acre property, all the bells and whistles. All of them. High-tech learning center, equestrian center. They take the members out into the community with competitive integrated employment. The community comes to them. You have horticulture. It is a beautiful place. And so the very first thing I did when I got notified that this process was happening in the state, I set up a meeting with the lead of the opposition. I had a meeting with him. I set up meetings with these places because I didn't know them from Adam. I listened to them. I reviewed all of the opposition statements I could find. I watched the former hearings that had already happened through the House and the Senate. And I really just tried to find what is the problem here and to see if I could try to the community. I didn't know which side I was going to fall on yet. This boiled down to that the state code says that no more than 4 disabled persons can live home, and the building was 500 yards apart. This is how the state of Tennessee had decided that this was going to protect people from the horrific abuses of institutionalization, right? Like, this makes no sense. Those of us who know about ICFs know that this has absolutely nothing to do with anything. So it's important to note that neither developer was seeking any government funding. This wasn't an HCBS issue. There were 501c3s funded by community donations. Both had paid for and obtained a Tennessee DIDD license and agreed to all oversight. They agreed to CQL, personal outcome measure monitoring. Nevertheless, even after this passed, the EPPC Planning and Policy Council had Brightstone on for a really quick, like 15-minute webinar to tell the community about them, to kind of ease anybody's angst, just to show what their facility was like. And after that, DIDD canceled all lunch and learns for the rest of the year because of them having Brightstone on. And I can say to this day, there are still people within the agency that are actively working against these 2 new housing developments, trying to make it so that they won't be able to open, and that our only choice will be ECF, which is no choice for families like ours. So the opposition to HCB or HB 2497, this is just some of it. Here's some of the quotes, was that we surveyed 1,000 people in 99 and home is what they wanted. Well, we have plenty of actual academic literature and research now since 1999 to indicate that has no bearing on anything, and we have better methods of ensuring self-determination now. We have a history that's tough to get over. Well, I represent families across the nation and certainly within this state that are living in a present that's tough to get through each day because ECF is not working. It could very well open us to an Olmstead violation. Hugo, you'll quite appreciate that. I mean, it was so absurd to me because this had nothing to do with Olmstead. We're talking about private 501c3s. We're not talking about HCBS settings here. And then it's a shame NCSA just wants to warehouse people. I want you to think back to my opening of my lived experience and how this has been my entire life, literally a toddler, is working to enhance the quality of life for this population. So just the absurdity of this. Nevertheless, I did go into disrupting the system. I stood alone. The other, all but one of the organizations that had been opposing this bill until I came in, all but one went silent. They did not oppose it. One did actively oppose and testify against me. And one, although they went neutral, they actually worked with me and the organizations to add in amendments and improve the language of the bill and were very helpful. And that was the council. But the Tennessee Disability Coalition was the one that actively worked against me. If you go here, you'll be able to hear kind of like my, you'll get the whole spiel of whatever thing happened and be able to hear kind of my speech on this. Despite it all, despite all the major organizations being against us, I mean, ARC, Disability Rights, the council, coalition initially, like I said, although all but one went neutral when I got involved and nobody else supporting it, it did pass. It was signed into law this past week. So next steps. Combating modernized institutionalization. That is really what we're dealing with here. Segregation and isolation of individuals with profound intellectual disability and autism and intense behavior symptoms. They cannot access these waivers that are meant for competitive integrated employment and independence. They still need the higher level of care that was available in the ICS that do not exist anymore. So something has to give here, because without the types of care that they need, we are right back where we started. This is institutionalization. This is where you can't access your community. You can't go to your own doctor's appointments. You can't go to Walmart. You are stuck. You don't have any choices. You don't have any friends. You don't have any socialization. You're completely segregated and isolated without the services you need. That is what the ECF Choices Waiver is for this population. I am working on combating that. Crisis care is my big thing, increasing the number of CIT trained police units, enhancing emergency room protocols. I'm also working on some emergency room changes to the actual medical, the provider side of things to try to reduce diagnostic overshadowing and negative outcomes. And I'm working on that with a team of physicians across the country. I'm big on behavior discrimination and really getting this understood to be a symptom of disability. We did get including care necessary for physical safety into the Autism Cares markup, reciprocity for manifestation determinations from IDEA into HCBS. This is a big one for me because IDEA already does determine that behaviors are a symptom of disability and that you cannot discriminate for those. So it's already established within the federal government. I just am going to be looking to push that into HCBS, enhancing and enforcing parity laws, and really just raising more of an awareness for biopsychosocial models, that this isn't something that you could just toss a couple hours of ABA out a week and their behaviors are going to be modified and they're part of their disability. And then HCBS reform, right? Requiring a higher level of care to include complex medical and behavioral care, requiring multidisciplinary care coordination where they have the full ability to have all their different specialists kind of under one roof, everybody talking, and then enhancing habilitation and meaningful daily activity, again, kind of combating the issues that after for elimination, and holding them to that integration mandate that everybody keeps talking about. Well, we are segregated and isolated. So I ask them all the time, what is the pathway of integration for people like my daughter? And then enhancing family caregiver support, including caregiver pay. You can join us at the National Grassroots Network, get involved in work like this. And then I have one final slide on the culture shift. And you can just kind of read about that, of what happened after the disruption. So the Disability Coalition now is hosting a webinar on the Forgotten Kids of IDEA, Tennessee students with behavior needs. You know, that's a really big shift from them testifying against us on the housing project. Family Voices Tennessee has been very involved and very accommodating. We have good collaborative conversations going on between them and Tennessee and CSA. And the Council on Developmental Disabilities changed their curriculum to the life course frameworks, which is much more inclusive of our population as well. And I thought that this is a really great quote, and I'm going to end with this. This came after they attended the Olmsted hearing. And so it's subtle, but notice the difference in the language here from before the housing issue to now. The decision known as the Olmsted decision set disability services on a fundamentally different trajectory than we had done. Institutions are shrinking and closing versus community services. Today, we still argue about what those should look like. We question whether they are living up to the vision of true inclusion. But there's no doubt that life would be completely different for all of us. The Olmsted decision hadn't been made. As one of the speakers, Nicole Jorick, pointed out, the Latin root to the word integration means to make whole. Our communities are not whole without people with disabilities. And so the goal for all of us should make sure that we are telling these stories and showing them where the gaps are and disrupting the system, because you can make a difference and you can shift the culture. And that's all I have for you. Harris?
Hi, Jackie. A lot of interesting information, although some more than depressing. And some of the things that were said out of the mouths of people that should know better in government was amazing. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are no ICFs in Tennessee, right?
They're closing the last of them. There's a plan to close the last of them right now.
Okay.
So it's not a good time to go trying to place your child in one, for sure.
Okay. And as far as the home and community-based services, there are no small group homes above 4 people, and the ones that do have the small group homes that are available do not have the level of care for people with high acuity needs. Is that right?
That is correct. So they just added 2 new higher levels. They're called CLS4, but they're CLS4 medical and CLS4 behavioral. They're separate. And so they still are very ABA based. They don't have the high quality DSP level 3 type crisis intervention, really an understanding of the behaviors that we would be able to manage inside of, you know, the ICF. And even on the 1950 papers, they understood these types of behaviors, but that level of support is not available in any of the group homes. in Tennessee. No.
Do you have a protection and advocacy office in Tennessee?
We sure do. It's Disability Rights Tennessee, and they have been very involved in disability justice. We do have some other bigger issues going on in Tennessee where we have Jillian's law that just got passed, which is going to very likely increase the rate of incarceration for individuals with intellectual disabilities. So they've been working on that. I can say they have not had any interest in getting involved in helping us with the ECF waiver issues. I personally have an ongoing investigation with OCR and an appeal in with TennCare. I have an administrative hearing July 22nd. I don't expect to prevail, but because very few ever do, but at least going to make it a matter of record that pervasive discrimination is still very much a part of our society here for people with profound autism and challenging behaviors. And so hopefully that sets somewhat of a path for other parents to continue to file suit and somebody can prevail. But I don't necessarily see that this is going to change until there's another, win on a lawsuit to show the violations that they're experiencing. Terry?
There we go. I may have missed the information, but are there any private ICFs in Tennessee that would house over 100 people?
No, not in large scale. Even private ICFs still have to be 4 or under. Or wait, no, I'm sorry. I think they have the code. The code, I think, allows for 10. I don't have it in front of me, but this came up during a housing thing. And I think they said that all were 8 or less. Regardless, there is a big push right now that they are planning on closing ICFs that do remain. Hugo and I have had some conversations about this because I wasn't aware that they even could. But this is something that is being done in other states as well. And oftentimes they will leave one small place that has like 4 beds open to kind of say we still have an ICF in state. And that would be in alignment with Tennessee. We have a place called the Harold Jordan Center. Very high level facility. And they are going to be adding 2 additional beds there this year. So it'll have 6. And that I would say within the next few years probably will be the last remaining place that can offer this high level, but they are only meant to be temporary, not long term. If you're there more days, ICF at that point, if they shut down all of the ICFs in Tennessee, would be out of state for everybody.
I was wondering, do they move many people out of state? Or is that
so they do, and unfortunately a lot of what's getting pushed out of state is children. So this isn't just long term, right? There's no short term acute place that can take this level either. Jadyn has been precluded from every place in the state. We spent 2 years on Kennedy Krieger's neurobehavioral wait list, but due to the pandemic, we never got in there. They had sent her out of state at one point to Georgia. Laurel Heights is where they send everybody. And the place is just, for Jadyn, it was like a death trap. I have heard a couple people say that it was successful for them. But that's where they send people. Cumberland in Virginia, Laurel Heights, and oftentimes they're children. And then there's I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rick Rader, but he runs Orange Grove. That is kind of the best option that people have right now for this acuity of care. And it is in Chattanooga. But even with their facility, they've had to come under these like really ridiculous strict regulations. He had an amazing aquatic center there for them. But that got shut down because that was considered segregation. And it's just, the rules are made by people who clearly don't have the lived experience and understanding of this population. They are made by people who, you know, went to school in some like social justice, whatever degree, and they think they know it all because they got this information out of books, and yet they have no time spent with our kids. I say all the time, not a single one of them with Jadyn, not one, not one. And I think if they did, then we'd have a lot different changes in our policy.
So what happens to, this is Rita again, what happens to your wards of the
You're right
state?
here. Okay,
To what?
so it's immediately the son-in-law. You can speak. Okay.
What happens to our what?
To your wards of the state, those individuals that don't have families, what do they end up doing with them?
Well, that's actually kind of an ethical concern right now. Is they get like state appointed conservators, right? So they're the conservative. This is, I was talking to Hugo about this earlier this week. The conservators work for the state, but the conservators now are getting these letters about the decommissioning of adult homes. The state's currently saying they're not going to evict people, but they're leaving it an option to move people out of their homes. The state wants those homes to make room for DCS. Well, those conservators are now state appointed conservators that are in a conflict of interest. Are they going to be actually truly serving the member? Or are they going to serve the person who gives them their paycheck and move them out of their homes into these lower level support group homes, which cannot provide the level of support that they have needed their entire lives? So that's what happens, is they get a state appointed conservator.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie, one of the points I made recently to DOJ and other organizations is the fact that we've gotten rid of state operated, or the state no longer has a hand in it, that we've become totally privatized in the system. And as a result, it's the free hand of the market. If a provider decides they want to look after people with higher needs, high acuity people, they will. But for the most part, they get to pick and choose what populations they want to choose, where they want to build the homes, how to staff them, and so on. Sybil in Iowa, they are closing Glenwood at the end of this month. And they had provider fairs where people could meet with providers and determine if their group home was appropriate for them. The providers got to pick and choose who they wanted to look after. When I spoke to DOJ about this, they said, well, you know, one good thing is that the providers stepped up and created a lot of homes that could meet this population. And of course, I said, yes, they did. That's true. But would they have done so if they didn't have this forum of people available, looking, you know, with high needs, looking for a place, and the providers could pretty much decide, yeah, we can open up 5 homes to meet this population, and this would be good. So, and I'm going to ask you to mute, and Knighton to mute, just we're getting some feedback from you. But you know, as long as we have a system that is at the mercy of what the providers want to provide and where they want to provide it, we'll have this situation. The people in Glenwood, a lot of them moved to Glenwood years ago to be with their loved ones at that facility. And now the state is giving them the options of having their loved ones all over the state. And this is a problem for people. So,
well, you know, I agree, but I also don't think that it really that the providers are the biggest problem. I think the overregulation and the insanity of kind of what these hard and fast rules are is the bigger problem. I just spoke with a behavior provider in another state just Friday morning, and he was like, I feel so refreshed and invigorated hearing you speak. He's like, how is this being received? Because he said, I agree with everything you're saying, but me and other providers like me, we have to go like down a back alley and kind of like make sure nobody hears us to be able to talk about the reality of these things and what this population needs, because it's like so taboo. And the state has put all these like extra regulations and ridiculous guardrails on that they've tied people's hands. You know, imagine having to go into a home where somebody could have intense, dangerous behaviors, and your only option is response blocking, you know, and if that's ineffective, you have to dial 911. And there's, because it's restrained, right? Like no safe holds, no common sense. Nothing is being done on a person-centered basis. It's just blanket, independent, or else, you know? And so there's such a higher liability for providers. There's not that intensive training. They're not getting crisis intervention training. They don't know training on safe holds. They don't even have verbal de-escalation training, because behaviors are just something that are temporary, because you can bring in a few hours of ABA and modify the environment, and that's going to be going away, right? Like that's the craziness of where we are.
Hand up. And so Sam is going to be the last question, then we'll take a quick break and come right back. Sam?
Oh, I better make it good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to thank you, Jackie. I learned a lot. The sound was really bad, but I could interpolate a lot of it and get what you were getting at. It was very good and very valuable. Thank you very much. So my thought for the first half, when you said, when you mentioned Willowbrook a couple of times, that some of my neurons started to fire. I lived near Willowbrook for many years. And it seemed to me there was a parallel that I think is worth thinking about. New York Times did a huge expose that didn't accomplish anything, as far as I know, about 4, maybe 5 years ago. A lot of people who survived Willowbrook were given a solemn promise by both the New York State Legislature and the highest New York State, I believe it was the highest New York State Court, which is in New York, the Court of Appeals, that all their needs would be taken care of for the rest of their lives, because this horrible thing had happened to them at Willowbrook. And in fact, what happened is they were tossed into group homes, particularly in the borough of the Bronx, and subjected to continued abuse and neglect for the rest of their lives. They were now, a lot of them are gone, but they were in their 70s and 80s, some of them. And terrible, terrible things were happening to them. It doesn't matter what the state's highest level institutions say. This is the reality of what happened. So the point I'm trying to get at is that when you say, and I don't say that you're wrong at all, that it's not the providers, it's this crazy ideology driven bureaucracy that is the focus of the struggle. I'm sure that that's true, but I have to think about what is it serving. The similar eerie parallels exist in probably every state. New Jersey, certainly. Ohio, we know about, where they've had great success, but lots and lots of other states. The bureaucracy serves a purpose. It keeps the infusion of funds that would be needed to serve people with high acuity, that would have to cause massive changes in funding and in the system as a whole, and would certainly redound against current providers and the way they're providing services. It would rock the boat. So it seems to me there's a lot of people who are trying not to allow this boat to be rocked, and I thank you for rocking it. So I'm sorry it's not a question, but that was my thinking.
Yeah. Well, we're building kind of like an armada of boats over here in Tennessee. We've got a lot of pretty angry parents, and we're just training them how to use their voices, and then it's okay. And then it's okay to be disruptive. It doesn't mean that, you know, you have to be cussing at anybody or aggressive or anything, but you certainly have a right to stand up and disrupt the status quo and state what your lived experiences are.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much, everybody. We are going to take a 5-minute break.